got to slow down. Oh, man, oh, man. Can Florida and Kentucky really be a big game? Boy, Florida needs it, don't they? They can't keep going through coaches. Neither can Mississippi State, but for different reasons. But goodness gracious, Florida can't keep. You got to stick with somebody at some point. I mean, you have to. You have to let them try to figure it out. We've become even more impatient than we were a couple of years ago. Now, that's saying something. I mean, y'all are all nuts. I mean, I had one buddy, one of my Ole Miss friends, was texting me on Saturday night. He was like, I'm ready to get rid of Kiffin. I was like, dude, let's set. I'm not sure what you're sipping on. Let's take a deep breath, get an oxygen tank, meditate, whatever we need to do. Go out and get that Zen moment under the stars. All of us need to do that on college football Saturdays. We get way too wound up. You know, sit Indian style, breathe through your nose, whatever. They've got apps for it. It's all good. You know, I mean, is Lane winning it maybe as much as you want? No, but he's been very successful. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Brought to you by our friends at Muskelly Furniture and any of the Muskelly sleep stores in the state of Mississippi, whether it's Madison, Rankin County, Hattiesburg, among others. And I sleep on the Purple mattress, the one and only Purple Grid. Groundbreaking, no-pressure gel technology is the star of every Purple mattress at any of the Muskelly sleep stores. Also, if you're looking for a recliner or two, some bar stools. Winnie and I have gone through, we bought bar stools twice from Muskelly, so my parents. And then maybe a sectional, comfy old sectional. Not old, comfy new for football season. Because we got a long way to the Super Bowl. If you want to upgrade, go ahead and upgrade. Super Bowl is the second week in February. So we have a lot more football left to play. Our next guest, our friend Brad Logan, Ole Miss insider, knows that we have a lot more football left to play. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. It's been too long. How you been?
Doing well, Bo, and it's interesting what you just said is there's a lot of football left. Ironically, if Ole Miss is going to have a special season and not go to the insert your condiment of choice bowl here, they have to win Saturday. They just have to, because if you don't, then all of a sudden the big goals that you have out there are not there anymore. But, yeah, it's great to be with you today.
You know, I think Saturday's winnable. I don't know where I would put it, Brad. 60-40 LSU? I mean, I think it's somewhere in there. LSU's got they've got some more juice on offense. They found another receiver over the weekend. The Notre Dame transfer ran the ball really well. But it's at home. And what are you hearing on like Harrison Franklin and was it Prescorn?
Yeah, the tight end, Caden Prescorn, who, as I'm sure we'll get to, Michael Trigg no longer a part of this program.
Oh, I hadn't even mentioned that today. Totally forgot about that.
About it is tight end, Caden Prescorn, is someone that not only catches the ball well, but he blocks very well. And we could talk all day about the offensive line. It was just didn't have a good day last Saturday in Tuscaloosa. I think the good news, by the way, in regards to injuries, I think all of those players you named are day-to-day. Okay. We saw Franklin, we saw Harris, and we saw Prescorn very briefly in the game. They didn't play very much at all. But this is just another week for those guys to get rested up. I think we'll see them more on Saturday against LSU. The good part, I think, if you're looking at it from Ole Miss, is LSU's secondary has not been great. I think they're 115th in the pass. The bad news is their defensive front is 8 deep, and they are incredible. And it's an offensive line for Ole Miss that has really struggled this year. And Bo, what's really been interesting to me is you look at Ole Miss's offensive depth chart, they returned almost everyone except Nick Broker on the offensive front. And, in fact, they go to the portal and get Quincy McGee from UAB, who's starting over Eli Acker. They go to the portal and get the left tackle Victor Kern out of Washington, who's starting over Jaden Williams. So that's what's just been interesting to see the development there. And, we haven't seen the development of Williams and the development of Acker to where they can play as second-year starters. So,
right.
and the line appears to regress on simply looking at the rushing numbers. It's not been a good year for Quinshon Judkins, and a lot of that is because, number one, he's got a target on his back, but number two, the offensive line just hasn't played well, and he's had an injury to his ribs that we learned. We heard from him Monday in the press conference. He said, he feels better than he's felt all year because of the injury sustained, which Lane doesn't talk about injury. So a lot of folks are just now learning that Judkins was actually injured.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Brad Logan, Inside the Rebels, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. We could have a big one Saturday night in Oxford that could go, deep into the fourth quarter. And this is an opportunity for Ole Miss. I agree with Brad. If you win this game, man, things change because you got Arkansas and Vanderbilt and La Monroe at home and some winnable road games. So you could go back-to-back. People could get excited again. Vanderbilt's a W, La Monroe's a W. Then you're all of a sudden, people are getting all warm and fuzzy. That's what I wanted to ask you. Have you ever, in the last, 3+ years, have you ever been to the Lane Kiffin radio show on Thursday night?
It's Thursday night. David Kellum, the Ole Miss Radio Network, hosts that. And usually they have Lane Kiffin. They'll have a player to spotlight, and they'll also spotlight another sport on campus. I've never personally been, but there's usually some good content for to be able to generate from that. So I always listen to it. No, I've never been personally.
Yeah. I had not been in years, and this is so funny, Brad. My kids are now both in Starkville at MSU.
Right.
And so I was up there a couple of Thursdays ago, and some buddies text me. One of them's from Houston, Texas, and I don't get to see him enough. And he was in town. He said, "Hey, I'm up here at the coach." I would never go, and he was up at the coach's show at our nest thing. And I said, you know what? I don't have anything else to do. Wendy's not in town. I'll go up there. And I went up, and it had been a while. It's funny. Back when you and I were rolling, Brad, I mean, I tell people all the time in the 90s, dude, the Cheryl Tuberville days of the coach's show, it was like you couldn't miss it,
Right.
I mean, it was, now we have so much. I mean, you're with Inside the Rebels. I'm 105.9 The Zone ESPN. We've got the phones. But, man, 1994, 96, 98, you had to be locked into the coach's show, didn't you?
That's where you got your information. There was no social media. There were no, Lane now has a Sunday press conference and a Monday press conference. Back then, even if they had a press conference, it wasn't broadcasted because there was no YouTube. There was no way to see it. And the news would only give you 5 minutes of sports, and you might get a snippet or here or there. And, it was completely different. So, yeah, I mean, that was a huge opportunity to get content that we get on a daily and an hourly basis. Back then, you only got it a couple hours a week. So, yeah, that was a huge deal. Now it's pretty much just a regurgitation of the game before. You probably know everything that he's already going to say.
Mm-hmm.
You might get a snippet of injury news here or there, and there are some things that you can gather from it. Lane's good for one or two pieces of information for every coach's show, and that's worth listening for me. So, but yeah, you don't get a ton like you used to.
How about this? This is crazy. Brad Logan, Inside the Rebels on the Out of Bounds show. This blew me away. I'd never thought about this, Brad, but 2 years ago, I think it was, Ryan Fowler and I jump on each other's shows. He's in Tuscaloosa. And they start in Tuscaloosa. They start out waiting outside, I guess, Baumhauer's at 8 a.m. in the morning for Saban's show that night, Brad.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Isn't that crazy? Because you can't get a table. So they start in the morning. They wait all day to get a table. And because I guess that's, man, for regular Joes like me, you, and most everybody else, that's the only way you can get within 10, 20, 30, 40 feet of him.
Yeah, I mean, the only time Nick will come out when he has a Nick's Kids Club event with his wife.
Right.
I think maybe you might catch him at a golf course at a charity event.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got coaches shows, you've got press conferences, and game days when you can see him on the sideline. Other than that, I do not think he makes public appearances.
Let's no, I don't think he makes many either. All right, let's go back to this game and where we are. Jackson Dart, he's a hell of a football player. And right now, because you just listed Harris, Franklin, and Prescorn are injured, and Quinshawn with the ribs. And, there's just a lot going on that's not going right. He's having to do everything. So I don't blame it on him. But do you think at some point we may see more Spencer Sanders at some point?
I don't know why you would, Bo. I mean, because I think Jackson Dart is the MVP of this team so far. Without Jackson,
I can't
Dart,
argue with that.
An argument. I mean, I think they may be 2-2, or maybe 1-3 without Jackson Dart. I mean, I don't know if they win Tulane or they win Georgia Tech without Jackson Dart. I think he's that important to the team. Now, sure, I mean, if Spencer Sanders may have had the opportunity to come in and play, maybe he's much better. But we don't know that because there's no need to know that. There's no need to know that because the coaching staff has 100% confidence in what Jackson Dart has done, and I think without question he is one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. He made a couple of decisions last week, but I think a lot of that was pressure from the Alabama defensive front, which is really good. The ill-advised pass down the field that looked bad, the interception, that's only the second interception of the year. The first one was it grazed off the hands of a receiver. I think he's made great decisions this year. He's had a ton of adversity. Number one, the offensive front has not been playing well. Running backs have not been able to run well because of a number of reasons. And then your wide receiving core is decimated by injury. And it doesn't help Ole Miss fans to see Keon Coleman over at Florida State lighting it up. And, we've only seen Z Franklin once, and that was last week, and he didn't do anything. So it's been challenging, to say the least, on offense for Ole Miss. But I think you really said something interesting that resonated with me, is that Ole Miss can kind of exercise some demons, so to speak, this week. You get a rival, LSU, in town, probably got more talent than Ole Miss, and you've got an opportunity to kind of right some wrongs, get back on the winning track. And then you can look back and think, okay, we beat one of the best teams in the SEC. We lost to Alabama, which obviously is still in it, can win the West. And now every game before Ole Miss is winnable, with the exception of probably Georgia, if you can get past LSU. So there is a path to success for Ole Miss. There is a path to a large bowl game, to a college football playoff situation, and in some ways a path to the SEC West if some things fall a certain way. But none of that matters if you don't win on Saturday. That's why I think this game is so big for Ole Miss.
Yeah, and because Lane put so much into Bama, which is fine, you usually don't follow that up with LSU, Brad. And
right.
You got to, how it is. You got to ask 18 to 23-year-olds to just get super locked in and up again. This 3-game stretch the State and Ole Miss are going through, people in the East can't fathom, and people in any other Power 5 conference cannot imagine what our two teams go through as part of the West Gauntlet. I don't know if you remember this last year. Brad Logan, Inside the Rebels, on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. But Brad, last year, Marty Smith, he said that it is the SEC West is the toughest gauntlet in American sports. How about that?
Yeah, and if you look at if you have some type of comparison with different, obviously play personnel and that sort of thing, you look at maybe the NBA, you look at the NFL, Major League Baseball, you talk about the NFL in the NFC East this year. I mean, with the Cowboys, with the Eagles, it's a tough division. Then you look at some other areas in college football, and you look at the Big 10, the Big 12. I think that's a very good argument, and I think that Marty could make that argument. And here's the thing: Ole Miss and State are doing this without bye weeks.
Right.
And I think if you look at this, and Ole Miss fans listening can say, I hope we Ole Miss fans can make the same steps forward that Mississippi State did last week against South Carolina, which they previously they did against LSU. If Ole Miss can do that, there's a chance on Saturday. But here's the thing: you have to the midweek practices, all the film study, and the type of gauntlet that both Ole Miss and Mississippi State play is a testament to the fan base that they're able to withstand some of this and the emotional strife that the fans put into it. And it's fun, but it's almost like a collective. It's fun, but it's
Brad,
so stressful.
I had a good friend of mine Saturday night, huge Ole Miss fan, love him to death. He's texting me. He's like, I'm done with Kiffin. I'm like, dude, you got to go outside under the stars, take a deep breath, meditate. You know, Lane's done a fantastic job. It's damn hard to win in Starkville, Oxford, and Fayetteville, among other places. And it is what it is. And you're right. So all right. So let's get into, I want to go to Pete Golding. And so I thought the Ole Miss defense played really well against Bama in the first half. Eventually, Bama imposed their will running the football, and they controlled the tempo, Brad, in the second half. And you know, credit to them. But I tell you what, do you say Suntarin or Suntarine, Perkins? How do you say it?
Suntarian Perkins.
Suntarian showed out. And how excited are you about him and the way he played? It looks like they're going to play him as kind of a Swiss Army knife where Pete Golding's going to line him up just about everywhere.
Yeah, and you looked with Perkins for LSU. You know, they had him kind of on the line of scrimmage last year in the first game, and then later on in the year they free flow him, and that's kind of what they did against Florida State. They didn't put him in a position to make a lot of tackles, and they finally put him in a position, for the lack of a better word, go find the football, and that's what he did the last couple of weeks. Number one, against Mississippi State, he had a big game, and of course he played well last week against Arkansas. So those are great opportunities for LSU. Now, I think Suntarian's going to be in the same position for the most part. Now, I'm not saying that he's as good as Perkins right now. I'm not. But I do think that Suntarian Perkins is going to be as good down the road as Harold Perkins Jr. is right now for LSU. And what he did at Alabama, I think, showed Ole Miss fans just how good he can be going forward. I want to ask you a question, Bo, and everyone out there listening. And I agree with you about the defense, by the way. How many people had Alabama winning the game with only 24 points?
I didn't.
No. So if Ole Miss can hold Alabama to 24 points and under 200 rushing yards, Ole Miss had a pretty darn good chance of winning that game. And they didn't show up offensively. And that's the thing. And that's just something that Ole Miss fans don't want to hear. But it's very simple. Ole Miss didn't play good.
Yeah.
And they didn't coach very good either. They missed a field goal to go up by 4 when they were up by 1. So many little things they didn't do well. They didn't punt well. They had a snap over the punter's head. It's just they didn't do the little things well, and they just lost the game. They were out-coached, and they were outplayed.
Well, Lane basically said that. You could tell how disappointed he was because he knew, but yes, Bama's good, but this is far from a dominant, nasty, big-time Bama team. And you could tell in the post game, Brad, I thought you could tell that Kiffin was like, we wasted an opportunity. Did you pick up on that?
Absolutely. And, there's been a lot said about Lane's Twitter game. And here's the thing, Ole Miss fans. If Lane's tweeting at 5 o'clock in the morning about how, it's going to be a beautiful day in Oxford, that has no bearing on whether Ole Miss is going to win or lose on Saturday.
No.
And people get so tied into that. And Lane does get very vocal on social media, and I get that. But that has no bearing on the game at all. I did sense some frustration following the game. I think he realized that Ole Miss – I think he realized just how good Ole Miss was. They just didn't play well, and they didn't call a very good game, he and Charlie Weiss Jr. They admitted that. So I think I'm very fascinated this week in Mississippi State and Alabama. Which Alabama team shows up? Is the Mississippi State offense going to show up from South Carolina? Well, I think Davis Wade's going to be jumping. I
don't think it's going to be close. They're just –
it may not be, but I am fascinated to see what Alabama team shows up.
People said I was too negative yesterday and Tuesday, and I'm not negative on Arnett or some of the things they're trying to – or Barbet or some of the things they're trying to do. It's simple to me, Brad. They lost a Hall of Fame coach last December, and there's just going to be some growing pains. And people don't want to hear that because Mississippi State and Ole Miss have gone through a pretty darn good 12 or 13-year run where our fan bases have been spoiled. We've had some great players come through the program, lots of fun wins and good times, and that's awesome. But there are major growing – you don't just flip the script. I'll say it like this, Brad. When Skip Bertman left LSU, they didn't just flip the script, and they're LSU baseball. When Nick Saban leaves Alabama, they're not just going to keep on rolling. So at Mississippi State, which is not LSU baseball or Alabama football, you're not just going to keep on rolling when you lose a Hall of Fame coach. And you got a 37-year-old who needs some time to figure out what he is, where he wants to go, and so on. So I just think, this is going to be a rough year. But they've had 4 coaches since 2017, Brad, and they need to stick with Arnett. And look, State or Ole Miss are never going to go on the Clemson run. Of course, they're never going to be in the ACC either. But Dabo got his you-know-what kicked for a while, Brad, before getting it up and running. Nobody wants to hear that. You got to give some people some time, and that's where I am with what's going on in Starkville.
Yeah, and I will say this, and this is obviously outside looking in, but, Bo, I think State fans can take solace in knowing I think Arnett completely revitalized that offense from LSU to Carolina. Now, a lot of people are going to say the talent level was different. I get that. But Carolina has a different product at home. And I think being able to do things offensively against Carolina, I think bodes well for Mississippi State going forward.
Good.
That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah.
I just think they're brighter days ahead from that center.
Well, you got to get the ball to Tulu and some of those guys.
Yeah.
They haven't had that kind of player. And Spurrier Jr., the wide receivers coach, wasted him for a couple of years. All right, buddy. It's gonna be wild. Are you gonna do any tailgating, or you all work on Saturday?
Well, we have to work all day, but I will enjoy it. Don't get me wrong; it's a labor of love for sure. I have spoken to a number of people. Number one, Eli Manning's coming back to campus.
Oh, that's cool.
The 2003 Cotton Bowl champion team. So Eli's coming back along with Jesse Mitchell.
We know Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse's great. There are a lot of players coming back.
Sharp guy.
And those guys. So going to be a big.
What's
big
that guy's name, Brad? I've only got a minute. It's like Ruziano or something. He was a fullback or something.
Riscano.
Yeah.
Riscano. Yeah, he was fun to watch. And real quick, spoke to someone at the university. A record number of tickets for recruits, and also a record number of tickets are being requested from players to come back for this game. Being 5 o'clock, being LSU, and it's just going to be it's the biggest game on the schedule for Ole Miss at home. So it's going to be a big Saturday.
Man, Eli Manning and that Cotton Bowl team coming back. Golly, that's going to be nuts. We'll have a great time covering it, man. We got to do this more. So we'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks, Bo.
All right, bud. Brad Logan, Inside the Rebels on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local, go with the home team, as Jake Mangum likes to say on those commercials. The Hit King. Powered by Farm Bureau Insurance. Favorites.com, FAVE. Man, I went hardcore storytelling for about an hour and a half. I feel better today. I feel like, kind of like therapy, which I need. But
you like to reminisce, you know?
You got to.
It's always fun.
I went way too hardcore sports Monday and Tuesday. And we got to have fun.
Let's dial it back.
Football season.
Yeah, dial it back.
I'm going to Pearl River Resort and Phillip M's and the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook, which, by the way, Jason, bet $50 at the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge. Play Dancing Rabbit Golf Club for $30. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone.